Happy to yield to the gentleman from Kentucky.
Words are words, but the problem is I served on the Oversight Committee when the Democrats did their inquiry, and that happened 3 floors underground in a skiff where nobody could bring their cell phones. I sat down there for hours, and what happened is there was no semblance of openness, or you would be arrested and taken to jail if you tried to witness what was happening inside of that skiff. For weeks, I sat down there with Ambassador Sondland. I sat down there with Lieutenant Colonel Vindman. There was no openness, no transparency, unless you count Adam Schiff running out every time he got a nugget of something that he could leak. And that is exactly how I witnessed that process. Was the gentleman on the Oversight Committee or the Intel Committee at the time?
No, I was on Judiciary.
So if you've been on either of those committees.
You know, and I understand the argument you're making. I would say a couple things. First, the resolution, again, you all used it as essentially took different provisions and modified them and so forth. The inquiry resolution was following those interviews, as I can best recollect, from back in October and September of 2019. The inquiry resolution that you all have essentially used as a template was after that. And essentially what the resolution then compelled, for example, HPSI to do was to shall hold public hearings and shall issue a report on its findings. Your resolution, and of course included that's why the open and transparent language was included. This resolution does the opposite. That's all I'm trying to figure out is why not say the Oversight Committee is going to have, quote, open and transparent proceedings. We're going to require them to hold a public hearing, and we're going to require them to issue a report. Why is the language permissive, and why has open and transparent been deleted? And this isn't a political argument. It's a good faith question.
Which I answered with a question. Why were we in a skiff for weeks?
What I'm saying to you is these resolutions...
When the Democrats were investigating.
I hear you. What I'm saying to you is this inquiry resolution and the inquiry resolution that was adopted at the end of October in 2019 are both taking place after 10 months, 11 months of process. You've described what you contend are closed-door hearings that HPSI conducted, interviews, that they conducted. Obviously, you've heard us talk about closed-door interviews that Oversight has conducted. My point is that at the impeachment inquiry phase, when we took that vote, from then on, everything was public, which is why the resolution was structured as such. In this instance, Republicans have removed it, and it's clear that they don't intend to have a public process. That's what I'm asking.
Well, I suspect at some point the other side of the aisle will claim that the information that's being publicly released has no business being in the public about bank records and things like that. So maybe it's an effort to respect the wishes of the other side.
Oh, I'm sure that's the reason, Mr. Massey.
But I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. I'm going to yield to the ranking member. I'll just simply say again, this is a good faith argument. It's not complicated. Adding open and transparent to make a commitment to the American people that you're actually going to conduct a process that is open and transparent shouldn't be complicated. It shouldn't be difficult. And I don't know why. I get it. I understand your opposition to some of the other amendments, including amendments that I'm going to offer, but this really shouldn't be one of them. And I'll yield to the regular member.
No, I think I may have an answer for you. I'm reading USA Today. There's an article, host Republicans, talking about how they omitted open and transparent from the resolution, and the excuse, the rationale that a Republican aide gave was that keeping open and transparent in was wordy. I mean, I really, I mean, open and transparent, I mean, 3 words, too wordy. That's the excuse to eliminate it. It's laughable. I mean, this is ridiculous. I mean, again, I think we all should agree that this should be open and transparent. It was in the previous resolution when we were in charge. Let's just put it in. I mean, that's a sign of good faith. But to say that it's being omitted because it's wordy, I mean, come on, give me a break. I yield back.
I yield back. Or I yield to.
I don't know whose time it is, but I assume it's the chairman's time, so I appreciate it. Look, again, I've got to just level set here. This amendment literally does nothing other than change the wording of the subheaders. I mean, and the ranking member just admitted that. I mean, we're here talking about changing investigative to open and transparent. Investigative. That's it. Just to put this in perspective, I have the side-by-side comparative, the 116th and the 118th resolution.
Well,
and
Why delete it?
Why'd you delete it?
Because we have our hearings have been in the open. They've been open and transparent.
You deliberately deleted this. Why?
And again, I was with what Mr. Massey was talking about. I was on judiciary. A lot of those meetings were in fact, most of them were in a skiff. And as Mr. Massey said, had we come out of that skiff and reported what was being said and conducted, we would have been arrested and gone to jail. Our process here has been absolutely open. The public has been included, told, as compared to what Speaker Pelosi did, where again, we were 3 levels below ground in a skiff. So I just don't think this is necessary, but.
Just for the record, the gentleman does control the time, so.
Okay, thanks.
Chairman, yield?
I'll yield.
Yeah, I mean, again, these words were deliberately deleted. And my friends keep on saying to us, it's not about Trump, it's not about Trump, it's not about Trump, but now it's about Trump. So you can't have it both ways. But again, deliberately deleted the words open and transparent. And with all due respect, the process that you are conducting right now, I don't believe is open and transparent. And by the way, I mean, I'm not on the Oversight Committee either, but some things, you know, especially on the first impeachment, were classified, and there was a reason for some of that. But again, all we're asking for is the gentleman to put back in the words open and transparent. For some reason, Republicans deliberately removed it. None of us can figure out why, but I support the gentleman's amendment. I yield. Thank you for yielding.
I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Is there any further discussion or debate on the amendment? Hearing none. Questions on the amendment? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. No. Noes have it.
As for your recorded vote.
Recorded vote's been requested. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Burgess.
No.
Mr. Burgess, no. Mr. Reschenthaler. Mr. Reschenthaler, no. Mrs. Fishbach. Mrs. Fishbach, no. Mr. Massey. Mr. Massey, no. Mr. Norman. Mr. Norman, no. Mr. Roy. Mr. Roy, no. Mrs. Houchin. Mrs. Houchin, no. Mr. Langworthy. Mr. Langworthy, no. Mr. McGovern. Mr. McGovern, aye. Ms. Scanlon. Ms. Scanlon, aye. Mr. Neguse. Mr. Neguse, aye. Ms. Ledger-Fernandez. Ms. Ledger-Fernandez, aye. Mr. Chairman.
No.
Mr. Chairman, no.
Clerk will report the total.
4 yeas, 9 nays.
The noes have it. The amendment's not agreed to. There are additional amendments.
Mr. Chair.
The gentlelady from New Mexico is recognized.
Mr. Chair, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment number 5 to House Resolution 918, offered by Ms. Ledger-Fernandez. Page 2, line 14, strike may and insert the following: shall. Page 6, line 8, strike may and insert the following: shall. Page 10, line 2, strike may and insert the following: shall.
Gentlelady is recognized on her amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this is a follow-up to the earlier amendment about the need for open and transparency in this process. But going to Mr. Reschenthaler's thought is, how do we do that? And I think one of the ways we do that is require, not permit, but require that the committees hold open hearings. It's simple. We always hold open hearings. This hearing that we are engaged in right now is open, and the American public is able to see what our arguments are, is able to determine, well, does this make sense? What should we be doing? What is the evidence? We need that, because right now, in the evidence that we as Congress people have been able to see, we know that there's clear and compelling evidence in the 100,000 pages of documents and the hours of testimony that President Biden was not involved in and did not profit from his brother or his son's business dealings. So in response to Mr. Norman's concerns about where does that evidence lead, the evidence in the record actually already shows that there was no connection. It's available, though, in closed door hearings and transcripts and meetings that are not easily accessible to the public. Extreme MAGA Republicans seem to want to do their work behind closed doors and in secret. My amendment would simply require that we hold open hearings. We need open hearings because for 11 months, we've seen Republicans on these investigating committees distort the evidence they've received behind closed doors. Debunked, fact-checked, not true, distorted, mischaracterized, and misused. These are the terms that we keep seeing regarding the Republican statements about the record so far. Representatives Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene are prime examples of misrepresenting the facts they hear behind closed doors. On July 31st, Representative Boebert tweeted, I quote, Devin Archer confirmed that the big guy participated in more than 20 of Hunter's shady business deals, close quote. That same day, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene told a reporter that Devin Archer said he heard Hunter Biden speak to his father 20 times about only their business dealings. The transcript of what Archer actually said is that Archer told the committee that he did not, open quote, witness specific business deals or business dealings or specifics about any kind of financial stuff, unquote, between Hunter and his father. What did Archer say Joe Biden actually talked to his son about on these calls? Mr. Norman might be very interested in this, because what Archer actually says they talked about in those 20 calls is the weather, geography, how's the fishing? They were, in Archer's terms, casual conversation. The news articles reporting these discrepancies say the transcription shows the opposite of what Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert claim. Something that is the opposite of the truth could be described as distortion or simply a lie. Una mentira, as we would say in Spanish, a lie. Mr. Chairman, I request unanimous consent to enter into the record the transcript of the Archer's testimony.
Without objection.
And because it is a big document, the article titled Transcript of Devin Archer Testimony doesn't back key claims about Joe and Hunter Biden.
Without objection.
Chairman Comer, who has appeared before us and who I respect, has been leading the investigations into President Biden. Unfortunately, Chairman Comer has also misrepresented facts. Indeed, the Washington Post reported that Republican leaders exaggerate their partisan reports in the media to claim wrongdoing by President Biden. The Washington Post noted that Comer and other GOP lawmaker claims eventually lead to reporting that is, quote, untethered from the documentation in the reports, unquote. Untethered. That means it's untethered from truth. It's untethered from what's actually in the reports. The Washington Post further noted that, open quote, Comer would have more credibility if he stuck to documented facts, close quote. Mr. Chairman, I request unanimous consent to enter into the record the article titled How Republicans Overhype the Findings of Their Hunter Biden Probe.
Without objection.
Republicans are hiding the facts and then lying to the public about them. There have been 11 months of investigation, almost all of which has happened behind closed doors. And now they want to continue that investigation, continue those committee hearings in secret. What are they afraid of what the public's going to see? Maybe that there's no evidence of wrongdoing by President Biden and that this inquiry distracts from the important work Congress should be doing, because Republicans continuously distort the facts to fit their preferred narrative. They've lost all credibility, as this newspaper article notes. Just a couple of weeks ago, Oversight Committee Republicans claimed that Hunter Biden received payments from Chinese companies and nefariously gave some to President Biden. But then we found out that hadn't happened at all. we found out that Joe Biden had helped his son make his truck payments while Hunter was struggling with addiction and in and out of rehabilitation. In 2018, before Joe Biden even ran for president, Hunter repaid his father the sum of $4,140 for a truck payment. Now, Republicans are trying to turn this $4,140 worth of help during Hunter's time of struggling with addiction into an impeachable offense. A parent's love is never without pain. The pain of watching your child struggle with addiction is something that too many Americans know intimately, something my own mother knew as she lost 2 sons to this accursed affliction, but not before she tried to help them. What parent in America would stop loving their child because that child spiraled into addiction and needed help? Americans will see in Joe Biden's truck payments some of their own actions to help their struggling children. Shame on my Republican colleagues for trying to turn this fatherly love into an impeachable offense. Shame on their attempt to politicize a parent's pain and goodness. I urge my colleagues to adopt this amendment to require public hearings, and I yield back.
Is there further discussion on the amendment? Pennsylvania is recognized.
Okay, once again, just a level set. Here's some facts on transparency. So the Oversight Committee has already had 4 memos detailing the bank records. Of course, those have been open to the public. They've had 2 public hearings. They've also released full transcripts of those hearings to the public. They've continued to update, not just Chairman Comer, but Chairman Jordan, Chairman Smith have been on TV, they've been on print. You can't turn on a news program without seeing one of those 3 update the American people on this. So to say that we somehow lack transparency is laughable, especially when you compare it to the 116th, when even after the committee went forward with the impeachment inquiry vote, the Intel Committee continued to hold hearings in a skiff. Again, so the transparency argument is laughable in the face of the 116th and in the actions of just the Oversight Committee. With that, I yield back.
Is there additional discussion on the amendment?
Yeah, Mr. Speaker,
Members recognized.
we can talk about memos. I got a memo here that disproves, basically refutes everything the gentleman just said, but I have a question. When are the transcripts going to be made public and released on the interviews? Does the gentleman know?
That I don't know.
Yeah, okay. Well, maybe before the end of the hearing he could find out, because again, you talk about open and transparency. That's what we're talking about. I yield back.
Joe, young lady from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Sure. I do think it's really important that this process, if it is to go forward, is open and transparent. I've already had personal experience with this process when David Weiss, special counsel, came in, sat for 7 hours of interviews. He offered to testify in public. That offer was rejected. And then we saw members of the judiciary come out and mischaracterize what, in fact, he had said in that interview. Mr. Reschenthaler is absolutely right. The 3 chairs of the committees conducting this sham impeachment inquiry have been all over the news, on Fox, on Newsmax, every night, mischaracterizing what they've found, mischaracterizing what witnesses have said. And that's why it's important that if this is to go forward, the American people be able to judge for themselves. There's a pattern and practice at this point of the Republican majority hiding what's going on, only cherry-picking the evidence that they want to move forward, disregarding when it's contradicted, even by their own witnesses. And I think it's really important that we adopt the gentlewoman from New Mexico's amendment.
Is there further discussion?
Mr.
Chair.
Gentleman from
Just a quick observation that our Democrat, I'm sorry. Oh, yeah.
Gentleman from Texas recognized.
That our Democrat colleagues in the Judiciary Committee, on which I serve, Oversight Committee, I'm informed, are welcome to participate, do participate. Representative Goldman has participated in the proceedings. They're able to see transcripts, they're able to see the information in committees. That stuff has all been transparent and bipartisan within the committees. The timing on how that gets released, that's, up to the committees in that conversation as we go through the continued investigation. But I also noticed we're talking about, people running to the press. Quick Google just shows a week before the presidential debate in 2020, Adam Schiff going on and saying, quote, "While we know that this whole smear on Joe Biden, with respect to the Hunter Biden laptop, I might add, comes from the Kremlin. Clearly, the origins of this whole smear are from the Kremlin, and the president is only too happy to have the Kremlin help and try to amplify it." That's what the American people have seen in terms of show horses going to the TV. I yield back.
Gentleman from Colorado is recognized.
I thank the chairman, and I suppose I'll pose the same question that I posed with respect to the amendment that I offered. I support Ms. Ledger-Fernandez's amendment, and so, for Mr. Roy or for Mr. Massey or any of my friends on the other side of the aisle who care to opine on this, all this amendment does is simply say that the committees, the 3 committees of jurisdiction that you all have decided are the committees of jurisdiction for purposes of this impeachment inquiry, Ways and Means, Oversight, and Judiciary, that they shall hold public hearings. In prior impeachment inquiry resolutions that have been approved by this Congress on a bipartisan basis, the language has always been shall. The Congress has always decided that when you conduct an impeachment inquiry, that the committees be compelled to hold public hearings, that it's not permissive. Republicans, for some reason, decided to delete that language. The shall language has been deleted from this resolution and instead has been replaced with may, giving your chairman of those 3 committees the discretion to decide whether or not to hold a public hearing. And so I just don't, and Mr. Norman, if you care to, many of you have spoken in the past about transparency and the need for public disclosure in hearings. And I'm trying to understand why this amendment is objectionable to my colleagues on their side of the aisle, and I've yet to hear a cogent answer as to why that is. And I'm not asking, and Mr. Reschenthaler, if you care to, we can go back in time and you can, go give the litany of examples from 2019. It's a simple question. The 2019 impeachment resolution compelled the committees of jurisdiction to hold public hearings. This resolution doesn't, and I'm just trying to figure out why. And anybody,
Well, I think one thing when you look at the shall and the may language, you got to remember that we're not dictating what the committees are going to do. We're giving them the option to follow the evidence, have the investigation, and then determine whether or not they're going to publish a report at all. We don't think that we should micromanage these committees. As far as the openness and transparency, again, everything has been out in the open and transparent. Going back to the 116th, we have to remember that even after the inquiry vote happened, the Democrats in the committees were still holding hearings in skiffs where you couldn't go out of the room and talk about what was happening, let alone the American people being able to watch. We've been very transparent now in the open. And lastly, if you want to talk about the 116th and go back in time, you got to remember that this committee was given less than 24 hours notice in the 116th of moving forward on the inquiry vote. We've been telegraphing this well in advance. We've been open and transparent, not only with the information, but also with the timing, and I yield back.
So I would just say to the gentleman, again, this is fairly straightforward and pretty simple, okay? The prior resolution, use the 2019 impeachment as an example. The language is this: the chair of the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence shall designate an open hearing or hearings pursuant to this section, okay? House Republicans replaced the Intel Committee with oversight, understanding that your investigation is being conducted primarily through the Oversight Committee. And you deleted the phrase shall, and instead you put the phrase may. And my point, I don't think it's very complicated. I think most Americans who are watching, by the way, Americans who may agree with you, I think they're a very, very small minority. I think most folks understand that this is a political stunt. But even insofar as, Mr. Norman, you making the case that you believe that there needs to be an investigation, if there need to be public hearings, why delete the language that requires a public hearing? Wouldn't you want a public hearing? I don't understand why you deleted it.